Hey guys, welcome back to the Ghost Bunny podcast. I'm your host, Bridget Marcourt, with a brand new episode for you guys. My guest today is a good friend of mine, Scott Michaels. Scott Michaels started his celebrity death adventures with the original hearse-driven death tour, Graveline Tours. When the internet took off back in 1998, Scott established the first celebrity death website, findadeath.com. Cut to 2004, Scott established his own Hollywood death tour and museum, Dearly Departed Tours, which you probably saw on Girls Next Door because we took one of their tours. And he offered like a standard tour and then the first walking ghost tour of Hollywood and tours devoted to Karen Carpenter, James Dean, Marilyn Monroe, and the Helter Skelter tour, which was specifically devoted to the crimes that were made famous by Charles Manson. And of course, he hosted the Bridget Marcourt Spooky Halloween Tour. The Dearly Departed tours and museum included artifacts that were bricks from the Cielo Drive home of Sharon Tate and Sharon's false eyelashes, Lucille Ball's hairdressing sink from the Beverly Hills home, and if I remember right, I think it even had red dye still in it. Floor tiles from the Ambassador Hotel where Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, and the infamous 1966 Buick Electra in which Jane Mansfield was killed in 1967. Scott's been involved with several paranormal investigations and has appeared on several paranormal shows, including Ghost Hunters, Haunted Collector, and several episodes of Ghost Adventures, including the infamous Cecil Hotel. And he's also done my podcast before. Scott's documentary, The 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter, brought him to the attention of Quentin Tarantino, who got Scott to assist with the historic details of the Manson murders for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Dearly Departed Tours shut its doors in 2021, sadly, and the artifacts have been put into storage. But that is just until a new home can be located in Palm Springs, where he has relocated. Scott now works exclusively on YouTube with his channel, Dearly Departed Tours. Scott, thank you so much for doing the show today.
Oh, thank you. It's so nice to see you virtually. It's been so long, but thank you for asking.
It has been so long. You're in Palm Springs now. Tell me about that.
Boy, well, I was kind of up until this week, with everything going on in LA, the terrible things. I was sort of like I really regretted leaving, and now it's sort of like, oh, having a sightseeing company. I mean, no, I'm not trying to make it about me, but things like this would affect us deeply, and just wouldn't be able to survive again. So, but Palm Springs is a very quiet place. I'm sure you've spent time here, and it's not vibrant. And that was sort of a disappointment, but it's beautiful, what is it? The quality of life. People are chill, and whenever I go back, because I go back every so often to do tours, private tours, and then I come back and I'm like white knuckle driving it. You know what I mean? and
That's
so
crazy.
yeah, it's a lot less stress, and also we have an airport. I can get places, so it's not like I'm isolated. So only 2 hours, 3 hours away from LA, so. It's a good location, and also we chose it because we can open up our museum here at some point, because we looked at all different places around the country, and it was Nashville we loved, but nobody knows who Jane Mansfield was in Nashville, and no one knows who such and such was in Nashville, so just made sense to be here. So we're still waiting to do that. But in the meantime, we have everything here. So it's a matter of just finding a way to do that. But we're happy to be here.
What about the history in Palm Springs? Do you find that there's a lot of like kind of tragic history there that you could possibly do its own tragic tour?
There is an element, yeah, I would say, not to the extent LA is, because in LA you can go turn around every single corner and there's something to point out. And I don't know it that well yet. So it's kind of, people have asked me to do tours here, and not an official level, like in a bus or anything like that. But it's like, I just don't know enough about it. But now that I'm settled here, I sort of feel like, okay, now you got to get over it. And I'm sort of mourning the loss of my business and everything. But I mean, silver lining, we chose to do it. So it wasn't, COVID didn't, they kind of closed the coffin lid on it, but we were on our way out anyway. As you know, you were at our farewell party, and thank God, because we put the Jane Mansfield car in storage, and as we were driving, the announcement was on the radio that I was recording the whole thing, and the announcement was, "This is a national emergency." I was like, boy, did we dodge a bullet there by closing early. So So yeah, the gods were on our side. My mom and dad were looking over me. We got very, very fortunate in that regard. I mean, selfishly, COVID was an awful thing, but selfishly, we dodged a major bullet by not being liable for a rent on a place for a year.
Definitely. Well, speaking of what's going on in LA right now, we got an evacuation warning last night. So we were packing up the cars and like waiting because for those of you who don't know, it's like in levels. So there's a level 2 is evacuation warning, which means like pack your bags, but you don't have to leave yet, but start packing, know what you're going to take and be on alert. And then level 1 is go. That's what they call it, go level, like
Yeah.
get out. So we were on a level 2 last night, and it got taken down around 8 o'clock last night. But it's only 35% contained, and it's literally right here. So my phone is not on do not disturb. I'm on high alert. My bag is still packed behind me.
It's
it's
terrifying, just
it's
terrifying.
it's absolutely insane. LA does not. It will never be the same, and it does not even look like how it looked 3 days
Yeah.
ago.
It was shocking to see, what they call the Sunset Fire right above Hollywood Boulevard, and places that were on my tour, and you see the police, pounding on doors, escorting people out, and it was like that's a block away, and so I'm laughing inappropriately just because it was so outrageous to watch it unfold. So thankfully, they're minimal. The cost of human lives could have been a lot worse,
Hmm.
and they seem to have, to a degree, that part of it, getting people out of there done fairly well. So, but
Yeah, I think people really understood the need to get out
mm.
and get out now. I feel like sometimes there's a lot of people that stick around, and this time I feel like people were just like, no, we got to get out of here.
Isn't it stunning that this can happen 25 feet from the beach? I mean, it's beyond comprehension that it literally oceanfront homes were leveled. There's not, yeah, it's hard to believe that can even happen. It really
I know.
is.
Well, it's like Hawaii too.
Yes, exactly like Hawaii. Yeah, yeah,
Only there, a lot of people lost their lives.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a crazy week for sure. But I'm glad we get to do this. And you say we laugh, but and it might be inappropriate, but we kind of laugh not because we think it's funny, but like I find myself laughing about it because it's just so mind-boggling that you just can't even wrap your head around what's happening. And it's not like laughing at it being funny. It's
Yeah,
laughing at like the ridiculousness of the
yeah,
whole thing and how is this even possible to be happening?
yeah. It's outrageous. It really is outrageous on so many levels. But you're like, what? Yeah, that was crazy. And that one by you it popped up like on a boom. It popped up, and then within 2 hours, it was like 800 acres or something like that. That's the Nichols fire, right? I think is what that one was called.
Kenneth Fire.
Oh, Kenneth. Yeah,
Yeah, the Kenneth Fire is the one that involves me, and they're pretty sure it was an arsonist.
yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there were the fires were heading towards Mount Wilson, which is the major, telecommunications hub. It's like, well, if there's gonna be damage done, boy, that's a way to do it. So thankfully, they got that under control, at least from that direction. But yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. It's just they were too random, too far apart from each other. So it just then they got the one guy. They were the for one of the fires.
Yeah, that's the one here.
Okay. Oh, good. I mean, not good. It's still going, but yeah, they got
Yeah.
somebody. So yeah, that's yeah.
Well, speaking of LA and your tours and everything, I kind of wanted to just let the listeners know how our friendship began. And a lot of them might already know because they might be fans from Girls Next Door and have seen you on the show, or they may have listened to my previous podcast that I had you on. But just to let anybody new here know that we first met way back in was it 2005?
What it was season 3 of your show, and I don't remember it makes sense. Yeah, because
It
yes,
had
it
to be
was.
2006, maybe. We started the show in 2005, and I thought you were in season 2.
Oh, maybe I am the pink cover. I don't remember.
But we got together because I really wanted to do a tour in LA, like a spooky tour. I wanted to take the girls on it. It was going to be kind of for my birthday.
Yeah.
And I got in contact with you, and we kind of customized one because at that time I had just gotten done reading the Black Dahlia Avenger book.
Mhm.
So I was totally fascinated with that case. And I think the Black Dahlia movie was about to come out. If I
Oh boy,
might have
that was a while ago. Yeah.
I can't remember if that was right at the same time or not, but there was a lot of stuff and fascination going on with the whole Black Dahlia case at that time. And so we did like a customized tour and we got the hearse,
Gargoyle.
the gargoyle from yeah, from Barris,
Yeah. Yeah,
George
that was a
Barris.
beautiful vehicle. I had, yeah, because now I think originally you reached out to a different tour company and you weren't jiving with the guy who was because you went for the Haunted Hollywood tour first, which is that's your wheelhouse. And I think you had a telephone conversation with him, but then he did a little more of a deep dive and found out that we were the ones that were good. And because I got a little bit of flack from that guy because he was like really angry because it should have been him on the show. I'm like, no, no, it wouldn't. You couldn't. It was, you have to know stuff, and so anyway, it was
You
just
have to know stuff.
yeah, you have to know stuff. You got to know your facts, and I just know that that wasn't the case. So I'm glad you went a little bit further and found me.
Well, the number one thing I do anytime I do something, and I'm thankful for the show because it actually shows this some of the times, is that I do a ton of research
Yeah,
before I'm
yeah.
going to do anything like that. So, and I honestly don't remember contacting somebody prior to you. It's not that I didn't, I just don't really recall it. But what I was really wanting was the hearse because we're doing it for the show. So I really wanted to have like that hearse thing. So if I contacted somebody else before you, it was probably because I thought they had that a
Oh
hearse
yeah,
to
yeah,
take
yeah,
us
yeah,
around in.
yeah, yeah.
Whether they did or not, I don't remember.
I don't.
But we ended up not needing it because George Barris gave us his to use.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something else, that car. That was a real something to see. That was. And it's funny when we left the mansion, well, going into the mansion was so exciting for me because, obviously it's the only time I've ever been there. And it was like walking into that main hall was just, oh my God, there's the stairs. And, I wish I would get out a little bit more nerve and I would have peeked around the property, but it was neat just to be in there. And I remember, because I didn't, I, you know, the girls next door didn't speak to me. Do you know what I mean? It was, and for those of
You
you,
you
I'm
weren't our
gay.
demographic.
When I was telling people, I said, "Well, I'm in a hearse with 3 Playboy bunnies. I'm living out someone's dream," But going into the mansion, I remember meeting you first, and then Holly came down with her Jackie Ho outfit, which was stunning,
Epic.
and you look wonderful in your sexy schoolgirl. And I think Kendra had a T-shirt on, and
Mm.
but yeah, and I remember talking to you because I had to. I felt like a normal obligation. We went to the dining room and sat there and talked for a little bit, and I go, I got to ask you because I'm here, Dorothy Stratton. I just have to say her name while we're in the Playboy Mansion, and there was nothing really much to say. You said half you asked him about it once or half brought it up once and just said it was tragic, but not knowing more about all of that and Paul Snyder and all that, it's fascinating. All that stuff that went down at the mansion with him, but yeah, it was just a real treat to go into the Playboy Mansion and then hauling out out the back gate with it was really cool is because I worked for another tour company as well, or no, when I quit that company, started my own, and they were real jerks to me. And
Mm.
as we were coming up to the mansion, the windows were down on my side and the gates opened, and I looked, and one of our tour buses was going by with one of the guys that was like the biggest jerk, and I'm like, hey. So
No
driving into the
way.
Playboy, it was awesome. It was perfect. What a great day that was for me.
Yeah.
Great day.
Yeah. So some of the places we went on that tour, I mean, some of it was Black Dahlia related, but not all of it. Like we went downtown. We went to the Alexandria Hotel.
Yeah, I went to the Biltmore too, where she was supposedly last seen, and
Yes.
of course the house that Hodel said she was murdered in.
Yes, I want to ask you about that house too separately though. But
Okay.
and we went to the house where her body was found in front, although there wasn't a house there at the time when her body was. It was
Right.
just a field. But we went in that field.
I mean, yeah, you could isolate it perfectly. There's a fire hydrant, there's a driveway, the houses weren't built yet, the telephone poles in the background, so we were able to figure it out exactly where it was. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And the Hotel Alexandria too, I wanted to bring up I feel like I've talked about this a little bit before, but it's so fascinating because it has such a crazy history. But it also, the part that fascinates me the most about it, and I've yet to see it, but is that they walled it off and there's a whole section of it, a whole wing of the hotel that has not been touched since like the
Yeah.
40s or something, but you can't get to it because it's been walled off and it's been open to the elements. And so it's not stable in there or anything like that. But supposedly there's like a glass wall on one of the levels where you can see in.
Yeah, I saw a video. Someone used a drone, and the windows are open. And I think they took their drone into the hotel just to go through some of those rooms that they could. And it is weird. They just walled off half of the hotel, and it's been sitting there walled up. I haven't done a big dive into that, but for some reason, they felt the need to keep like a quarter or a half of the hotel just bricked up, and it's still there.
Well, I
I
heard it
think
was a
it's
dispute between the owners and like they got half of it or something like that. And then they just walled it off. Something, I forget what this whole story is, but it's something like that. But regardless of why it's like that, the fact that it's like that and has been like that for so long in
yeah,
like downtown LA, like this
yeah,
whole wing of a hotel is just like abandoned and creepy and
yeah.
left since like the 40s with nothing touched, just like intrigues me to no end.
Yeah, and then it was a when we were there, because I think if I remember correctly, I mean, there's such prime real estate down there. It's a beautiful hotel, so they redid it. It became like a nightclub, didn't it? I mean, it's all I thought it was all very hip and swingy, and like the ballroom was this huge nightclub. Now is what I thought I knew. But at that point, it wasn't redone yet, and it was like a transient hotel. And
Hmm.
I remember going in there with you guys, and these people were up there hanging out the windows, going, eh. And it was really it was bizarre. It was a
Yeah.
really bizarre juxtaposition to park the hearse and these beautiful women are coming out and these guys up there. It was kind of funny.
And we went into that room that supposedly Valentino stayed in.
Yeah, I remember that day. That day, they said this is where he died, and they told the security guard told me and said there's still blood on the walls, and I'm like, okay, that's when I kind of go, I can't. And I think you guys continued on, and I didn't go into the basement. I wish I would have, but at that point, I was like, oh, this is sort of silly. But he said there's still blood on the walls. I'm like, well, he died in New York, and he didn't die that way, and
Oh, that's weird. Who said that? Like the guy that was giving us a tour?
not that guy, but there was a guy with us. I think we had to have an escort because it was it was empty up there, and maybe a security guy or for their
Oh,
insurance because it was a shoot. That's right. It might have been there. They needed somebody there for their insurance, but it had to be someone on the staff because they knew the place.
yeah.
And but it's just it was just kind of funny. That's
Well, the basement was cool because it opens up to the tunnels underneath, like downtown LA, like
mm.
Prohibition era tunnels and things like that. So that was kind of cool. We got to go into that a little bit.
Yeah. Did you figure out? I remember there being like writing on the wall, like Asian writing. I think it was. Did anyone ever figure out what that said?
Oh, no, I never found out what it said, but I have to assume that that was there for like a movie or a
Yeah.
photo shoot or something like that. Like, I don't think that that was like old or there from
Yeah.
like back in the day or
Yeah,
anything.
he presented it as if this suddenly showed up mysteriously, because that was the whole tone of the show, is to be spooky, but it was, it was funny. I wondered what
Yeah.
it said though. I always wonder what it said.
And then we went to the Comedy Store,
Hmm.
which was
Yeah,
pretty cool.
the Comedy Store had a really famous, what do they say, specter or something down in the basement because they say mob hits took place down there and it was like gambling. And I remember we all went down there, the whole crew with Paulie Shore, and then you guys went upstairs to the main room, and I stayed downstairs by myself just to see if I could, get any kind of vibes. And I didn't, but then I wasn't that sensitive to it at that point. I'm a little bit more now where I can, hairs stand up and that kind of thing. But I was just looking at some of the photographs that I took, and I took a lot of photographs down. There were all about 10, I would say, in that very room. And there are some amazing little orbs, however you believe about that. I'll take one from one direction and one from the other direction without a flash, and these odd things were just showing up with little nucleuses. Because I'm not a big orb person, I always think, well, it's mostly dust, but it was just a lot of the pictures. Only two of them showed up with these interesting little orbs in them. So, and also in the kitchen, that's right, in the kitchen, I got a couple of orbs too, but not in the main room. Nowhere else. It was just those two places. It was kind of
Well,
interesting.
what was really interesting about the basement too is it had the old Ciro sign because it used to be Ciro's nightclub in
Yeah,
Hollywood, and it
yeah,
had the old Ciro sign in there, an actual booth from Ciro's.
yeah,
So that was kind of cool because you kind of got that vibe and the feel for what it was like back
yeah.
then.
Yeah, and also they had in the storage room, they had a poster for Andy Kaufman being live there. And you know what else I saw on our marquee, on the marquee of the place? At that point, Joe Rogan was on the marquee as the headliner,
Oh, that's so
which is on
funny.
that day. So I just thought it was kind of a fun bit of trivia. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's funny. Also, we talked about going to the Biltmore Hotel, and I forgot to say this when you were there. Holly and I went with our friend Ashley and our friend Victoria, and we just did like kind of a little ghost
Hmm.
thing
Hmm.
there, and just as girls, we weren't really filming it or anything like that. And we went into this like I don't think it was a ballroom. It was more like a conference room, but it was set up really spooky. For some reason, it had like flicker flame lights on the walls and they were like barely on. So it's really dark in there. There were seats like in an with like an aisle down the middle on both sides. So there's chairs. And then in the front, I don't know, there was just like a table with like a drape on it, which could be for any presentation, but it almost felt like it was like set up for like a funeral type thing.
Yeah,
I
yeah, or a
don't think it was.
seance or something like that too. Yeah, yeah, places like that. I mean, what they were, he did describe it in the show as if it was like being in the Titanic, and it was. They had that feeling because it was so opulent, yet it was like falling apart, and but that's what made it so brilliant to look at. Of course, the building's been saved, but at that point, it was sort of just deteriorating, and it was
Oh,
fascinating
are
to
you talking
see.
about the Alexandria?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, you're talking about the Biltmore. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm so
right. Yeah,
sorry.
at the Biltmore.
Yeah,
And this was
yeah.
like, this was more recently. Holly and I and our friends went to the hotel and we sat down in this little room
Okay,
and we
okay.
started doing like a EVP session.
Hmm.
And every time we played it back, there was just this like growling, snarling
Ooh.
noise. And so we were like freaking ourselves out and we're all scared and everything. And then all of a sudden the doors bust open
Oh
and
my
we
god.
screamed and it was security. And they
Oh,
were like, you guys can't be in here. But we scared them and they scared us.
oh, how funny is that? Wow. Did you get anything on supposed to be that little girl or that little boy down in the lobby or by the bar there that kind of peeks around corners and
I didn't see anything like that, but I will say that security said we weren't allowed to like be doing what we were doing, but they did say that they have security footage of the check-in counter and there was a candle on the check-in counter. It was just moving across the
ooh,
counter.
how interesting.
But he said, I bet nobody will show that with you because it's like a secret thing.
Yeah, isn't it funny how hotels get that way? I remember when I first moved to LA in the early 90s, the Roosevelt Hotel, again, it wasn't what it is now. Now it's a very nice, very, posh or the average person, it's a lot of money for the average person to stay there. But it wasn't at that point. And I remember there was a woman who worked, I don't know if she was the PR person or the manager of the hotel, was reaching out to us to bring people in. And they had a whole sheet of ghosts that are in the hotel that they gave us. And I'm like, now forget it. You even ask about anything, they're like, no, nothing.
I
But
know.
yeah,
It's so sad. When I used to come and stay in LA, I specifically would stay at the Roosevelt
mm,
because it was haunted and it was relatively inexpensive and you're right in the heart of Hollywood. And they were totally open about their ghosts. I think there were even ghost tours that you could take. There was the Marilyn Monroe mirror where supposedly she appears in the mirror and they would like
yeah,
tell you all about it.
yeah. And I
And
think they auctioned that off. I think it's just gone from the hotel, that mirror.
really, I
And
thought they just moved it upstairs.
it's nowhere to be seen. And it's the rumor is that it's auctioned, but it's certainly not on display anywhere. It used to be down in the lobby, then they moved it up to the mezzanine level, but
Yeah,
it hasn't been seen in probably, 10, 15 years.
that's crazy.
Yeah, they just want to. You heard about the 213 room, right? The cabana out back.
Is that your story? The one?
Well, that's one of them that's the Roosevelt one.
Will you
Yeah.
tell me again? Because I do remember your story, but like I feel like it's so crazy that I need to hear it again.
Well, okay, so my friend, I don't want to say her name, but worked at the hotel in a management position. And so it's secondhand to you, but it was firsthand to me. And this was at the time. So nobody knew anything about it at that point. And she said, this is weird. And this story is bizarre. She said, we're all on radio. And after people leave the room, a security person has to go through the room. They go to check if anyone left chargers behind or, anything like that, and they'll put it in their lost and found. So one person, up until that point, it was only one person. Now they don't do that anymore. You have to be in pairs to do that. But this woman who was on the radio went into this 213. It's they call it the Cabanas, which is like that little motel alongside the hotel. It was built after the hotel, but it's like a little apartments next to the pool that's separate from the hotel. So the woman went in, and on radio, people heard her scream. And then when they got there, she was sitting on the floor crying, upset because of what she had seen. And she described it. And she said she walked into the room, and there was a man floating above the bed, like vertically, like I think the word is vertically. I was going to give you, but he is like standing up above the bed, like in the middle of the bed, but he had no feet. He was just hovering there, and he was wearing pajamas, and the front of his pajamas were covered in blood, and his face was beaten up too. And so she entered, like if you were her, he's like looking this way, and he's just floating there, and then he just goes and looks right at her, So that's when she flipped. I just got chills thinking about it, and she flipped and left the room. So after that, they say people were leaving that hotel room a lot. Like you're saying, I'm getting out of that room. They would see somebody in the mirror behind them in the bathroom, and people were saying, "I don't care where you put me, but get me out of that room. I don't want to be in that room." Because then shortly afterwards, this was before there were no even any kind of ghost investigations at that point. There's a friend of mine named Marla who wrote a few books called Ghosts of Hollywood. So we spent like the night in the basement of the Wax Museum one night, and there weren't any. I don't even think Ghost Hunters was out yet. So we were like the first people to get into that room. And when Marla went to the front desk and said we want to book room 213, the guy was like, what? Like he knew it was up, but he didn't think anyone else knew it was up. But we were there with three different psychic mediums that I knew to spend the night in the hotel. One of them, he was lovely, Kenny Kingston. He used to be this psychic for Mae West and Lucy and what came out of it at the end of that night was they say that this man supposedly hurt somebody in that hotel room, in that cabana room, and he was killed somewhere else, but he comes back because he has this association with this woman that he hurt in that room. But I've done the research. I haven't been able to find anything. And of course, I wasn't the eyewitness, but what ended up, I guess the cause of it is they were doing plumbing work. And they say that ghosts and water and running water have something to do with, maybe the charges, electrical. I'm not sure exactly what prompted it, but it never happened before. And I'm not aware of it happening again. I'm not aware of it, but it was it described as pretty horrific. And the person who was on the radio, not the security person, but the person who was the management of the hotel was there with us. So, it was legit as far as the claims of what happened there. We got chills, but I don't know if it was more because we were freaked out by it, but the psychics, they lit the candle and they were summoning the spirit. And that's what they say happened. And I told them, close it up. If you can close it up, just close it up. If there's some kind of portal there, just let him go, put him on his way. So
Yeah.
I don't know if they did go or not, but it was a fascinating experience. It's a
Have
terrifying
you had
experience.
other experiences at the Roosevelt?
I spent the night in the Montgomery Clift room, and the person I was with claims were shoved in that room. But I never heard any trumpets like they say. The famous ghosts were, I think there was supposed to be a little girl in the lobby. Oh, the cold spot in the Blossom Room. As you enter from the front entrance, the ballroom is on the right, and that's where the very first Academy Awards were held in 1927, I think. But you go into that room, and it's not that big. Probably fit 300 people, so it's a fair amount. But there was a cold spot that always traveled around. It's about 3 feet around, and you could walk around and catch it somewhere. It always moved, but you could find it. But that I think that's what I have from that hotel. I think that was all I've experienced personally.
I've stayed there several times and I don't have an experience from there. And one of the times I stayed in the cabana room, but I don't know what room number I was in. I wish I knew now.
Yeah, that was a
But it was
while.
a long time ago. Like this would have been late 90s, early 2000,
Yeah,
somewhere in there.
yeah, and that's when we were probably in. Well, yeah, it would have been around 96, 7, 8, something like that we did that investigation. I took photographs That's right, I did, and there was a weird photograph in that room that I got. It was like a shadow, but I mean, not a subtle shadow, like a fadey shadow. It was like a cutout person, like I pasted into the picture, and I
Whoa.
haven't looked at that in years. But as far as I saw, there was a light, there was a mirror. It could be explained away, probably, but it took me a long time to figure that out, and I didn't. I think it's a bizarre picture. It looks as almost like somebody's holding a rifle, but I know, right? I'll
Okay.
try. I'll email you the picture. I mean, somebody will probably go, "Oh no," right away. But I say I took it. No one was there. I was right there with them. It was one of the psychics was there, and that was a wild image.
Definitely send me the picture. I'd love to see it. Oh, one more thing I forgot to ask you about the Biltmore. Did you know that they were doing auditions there? This was relatively recent. They were doing auditions there for like America's Got Talent or something like that, or American Idol or one of those things, and somebody died. They died in like the stairwell or something. And I think they got pushed down the stairs or fell down the stairs or something like that. And this is a relatively young person that was like auditioning for the show.
No, I haven't heard that. That's wild. I'm
Did you
finding
find
out
it?
about it. It was No, it was built. There was a Biltmore resort in Phoenix, Arizona, where a little 8-year-old boy was a statue fell on top of him.
Oh,
But
that was recent.
yeah, that was really recent. But no, I'm not finding the Los Angeles. Wait,
I'm
authorities
looking.
are investigating the mysterious death of Altalomo, who died according to the LA County coroner. Oh, this was in 2010 now. Oh, America's Got Talent. There we are.
Yeah.
Auditions for America's Got Talent were held at the hotel. It's not known if she was a contestant, not determined if it was homicide, accident, or possible suicide. They just say, baffled, a woman tumbled down as many as 8 flights of stairs and died. That's weird because stairs aren't a straight flight.
And they're
No,
not there either. They're not there. Like you can look, and you can look down and they go like this. So she would have had to have jumped or been pushed like off and went down like the middle of them, hitting like the banisters
that
and
makes
stuff.
more sense. Yeah. Yeah. How weird.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
I've never
very
heard that
weird.
one. That's a wild story.
Yeah. Okay, one more thing from our tour. We went to the Soden house, and I know we didn't get to go inside, but that is where George Hodel used to live.
Yes.
And they think, I don't think it's been proven yet, but they think that that's possibly where Elizabeth Short might have been murdered, the Black Dahlia.
Right. That's what he claims. And I'm not an expert on the Black Dahlia. It's not one that I've done deep dives into, but I know there were several suspects. And I know that Hodel, his father, was a suspect for a period of time. He found photographs in his dad's possession that he claims were Elizabeth Short. And then scientists looked at it and said, no, it's not. I mean, that's their job. And then he found like a handwritten note that was supposed to be hers or his father's, and experts said no, it's not. And so I don't know. And he said the room that she may have been murdered in was like a hidden room. And I went into the house once. They were doing an open house tour for I think it was Conservancy, LA Conservancy or something. And I went and I found that room, and it was just basically, it wasn't that big. It was behind a stereo system, television entertainment system, and there's like a bookshelf that opens up, and you go back there, and it's probably maybe 6-7 feet long, and it's very narrow actually. It's probably 10 feet long, but it's only about 3 feet wide. It's not like a so unless he means something else, the room I thought was the one. It didn't look like it could have been. But and the police went. I mean, granted, the police are crooked back then, and they were, they could have. He might, so he was supposedly giving illegal abortions, and they say she was pregnant because they used to. She was, brought to parties, and she was not a prostitute, but she, you know what I mean. She may have been pregnant by one of his friends, and they're
Hmm.
saying that what might have happened. But again, I didn't do a big dive into that. But the house is incredible, bizarre
The
house.
house is so crazy,
Yeah,
and if you guys don't know what the Soden house is, you can look it up online. There's tons of pictures, but I just can't even imagine anybody living there like that being like a home.
yeah, yeah. Because the house is built around the swimming pool.
Hmm.
So in order to get to other rooms, you're there's like houses here. I mean, rooms. The bedroom is like enclosed on the other side of the pool, and all the other rooms, kitchen and study, and the other bedrooms. And then the front of it is where like the living area, or the living room and the entertainment area. So in order to go to the other rooms easily, you have to go outside to the pool and go back in these doors, these glass doors that open along the pool. It's really a weird setup.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't been there. I've only just looked at pictures, and I know so many people that have had like crazy experiences
Oh
there.
yeah. Oh yeah. I've not heard that. I've never heard of people really having paranormal stuff go on in there.
So I want to go check it out.
I would, yeah.
Yeah. So, Dearly Departed Tours.
Hang on one second, because
Yeah.
I took a couple of notes about our tour, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So we're talking about when we went to also, we went to the witch's house
Oh,
as
yes.
well, and that was good fun. Nothing happened, although there was another one where I got odd sort of bits of what do you call them? Those things, orbs, and so we went to the Alexandria and the orbs in the bathroom and talking about that. Now we had also, oh, there was just one other funny story. We were in Compton, going from the Black Dahlia house in this hearse with three beautiful women, and it was hot. There was no air conditioning. There were no seats. See you guys on pillows in the back, and it was
Yeah.
like I could see your hair was getting lower and lower and lower, and it was hot, and we were stuck in freeway traffic, and we stopped at McDonald's, and I have a picture of you guys in line at McDonald's. It was the most surreal, image. This car pulling up, and then just normal everyday people going to get their McDonald's, and this whole thing happens. It was incredible. That didn't make it into the show, I don't think, the McDonald's, but that was just a
No.
funny little instance.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there were no seats in the car, and I'm sitting like this, like all hunched around, but it was still worth it.
I had
And do you remember we're in like Compton and stuff, and this hearse had hydraulics on it, so we were like
right.
bumping up and down in our hydraulics, cruising down Crenshaw.
Oh, that was funny. That was funny. Oh, did I say Compton? That was really stupid. It was Crenshaw. It was a C. Yeah. But yeah, because yeah.
Okay, so Dearly Departed Tours, tell me how that got started.
Well, there was originally, back when I moved to LA in the early 90s, there was another company. It was the first company like it anywhere. It was called Graveline, Grave, New Word Line. And there used to be there was a Gray Line tours, the bus tours, and it was a kind of spoof off of that. And my friend Greg started that company, and it was a hearse driven tour, although his were modified to have seats around, the death styles of the rich and famous. And that was before Hollywood became what it is now. And, there were, I don't know, delicately put it, but we did have homeless people, but we knew them. There were about three of them, and they were really colorful. Like Mars was one of the guys, and he had this big styrofoam hat. And every time he found anything electronic, he'd stick it in the hat, and he would just walk around Hollywood Boulevard. By the time night, they weren't even panhandling. They were just around. They were really nice. But anyway, Greg started this company, and I was living in Chicago, and it was my goal to work for him. So I took a trip to LA, and I kind of eked my way in, and he ultimately hired me. So I moved here. And then I left. I went to England for several years, and while I was gone, the company went under. So when I got back to LA in 2002, I think it was, I just thought, well, no, I got to do my own, because all the other tours, they weren't focusing on what I had a job shortly for one of the sightseeing tours, and they basically give you a bus and tell you to go away with 12 tourists for 2 hours. There's no research. Everything was word of mouth. One driver would say, that's the Pretty Woman Hotel, and the other one would say, that's the Pretty Woman Hotel. And all my stuff was legit because I did my own research, but people didn't really want to see where Hugh Grant was arrested, with his pants around his ankles, or with, Janis Joplin overdose. So I quit, and it's a very long story short, started my own company. And then ultimately, after about 10 years of doing it on my own, or so, maybe 8 years, we opened up a museum. We got a storefront, and we started with a little museum, which is where I first met. We did your tours out of that little museum. And then
Mm.
we ended up getting a bigger museum over on Santa Monica by the cemetery.
What do you think inspired your fascination or interest in like death and all of this genre?
Well, I've always gravitated towards things that were weird, and almost, when I was growing up, I remember like the kids used to say, when you're driving past a cemetery, hold your breath because somebody's going to die or your pets are going to die or something like that. And I remember that being kind of really creepy. And of course, I always gravitate towards creepy. So when I was, 10, 12 years old, I would bike to the cemeteries and just hang out. We lived in Detroit. That's where I grew up. And we lived on a corner. To look at this corner, it doesn't look very dramatic, but it's set up in such a traffic way that people were killed in front of my house a couple times a year it happened because there was, if you were speeding and you weren't looking, you would plow into a traffic light or something. It was really easy to do because of the way it was situated. So that would happen like in the middle of the night. I'll be in bed and you'd hear the screech and you think, oh, they're going to hit. And sure as anything, they would. You can tell kind of by the screech where they were. I don't know what it was, the location or something, but you kind of knew. And then, my when it was really when it was winter and it was icy, we would literally kneel on the sofa looking out the window and watch it happen. There's sliding on the ice. Would say that one's not going to make it, and sure as anything, there would be an impact in front of our house. So it wasn't unusual for me to see somebody like they come to our house because it was right in front of our house, right in the corner there is where we live. So they'd come and knock on our door, and they got blood and everything coming in. Call the police, please. And so it wasn't that unusual for things like that to happen. So I guess I would say I was desensitized pretty early on. And then, crime wasn't a big deal back then either. So I remember there was a body found of a woman that I don't think they ever identified behind a restaurant that I used to go to. And this is back in the late 60s or early 70s. So we bike up there just to go back there because it was just so interesting. So it sort of just developed from there. And when I came to LA for the first time, and I took that tour, and then just for another side trip, we went to Hollywood, Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills. And when I was at Lucy's grave or Liberace's grave, I thought, oh my gosh, they're right there. And that was fascinating to be that close to people. Cemeteries weren't a tourist destination yet, and then, I thought, well, where people died is historic. You can go to 50 places where Frank Sinatra lived, but there's only one house where he died. And that's where this sort of magical thing happened that they went from a human being to, whatever it is, superstardom or star. I don't know. It's hard to explain that, but they changed to something not human, but spiritual almost. And not in a prey kind of way, but you know what I mean? It's sort of like they became immortal, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Something that you said, and I think I've brought this up to you before because it stuck with me so much. And you think you had a sign of it in your museum too. But you were talking about how everybody has two deaths.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for those that don't know, everybody has two deaths. The first is your physical death, and then the second one is the last time anybody ever says your name.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just stuck with me so much because I feel like it's so, so true. And I feel like there's people who maybe like look at what I do or what you do or whatever and be like, that's not right. Like let them be in peace or,
Yeah.
stop doing that or whatever. But I feel like we're keeping the memory alive and we're reminding people. And like you said, like it becomes like this kind of almost spiritual thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when in our museum, we had all these weird little artifacts just having to do with, houses where people died, or, I had a piece of John Denver's airplane, and I had Jane Mansfield's car, literally her car that she was killed in. And, there's a lot of, I would say, attachment or vibes or whatever it is, because these are horrible things and they echoed off of these horrible things. But I had another friend of mine who is a legitimate, like crazy legitimate psychic medium person. And like she'll say something and it happens 10 minutes later. It was bizarre. But she just said, they like it because they're remembered. May not be the way they want to be remembered. However, they're being acknowledged. And they like that. So they'll pop in and have a look and see what's going on. And we've also been really respectful of our items. We've always, holy water, sage, salt, everything. We always say hello when we walked in, just because there was absolutely, vibes going on. In fact, you were the only people we ever let do a paranormal investigation in our old shop. And yeah, that was wild. Yeah. Yeah. That was something. I
And
like,
we definitely picked up on some stuff too while we were there.
yeah. Yeah, I remember by the car, you guys were getting some feedback, weren't you?
Well, and by the Patsy Cline stuff,
Mm.
like it was like I forget exactly. I'd have to go back and like listen and stuff, but there was like EVPs that were coming through that were like related to Patsy Cline while we were standing looking at the things from her that you found from her plane crash.
Yeah, and we had I remember I've taken sometimes I'll do like lectures, talks, we'll say talks, and I'll talk about these and I'll bring some of my things with me that it can fit in a small bag or a small suitcase. And the one thing that psychics tend to notice, pick up something on, I have a piece of the twisted wreck of Carol Lombard's airplane. And like that's something that really actually what it is because the wreckage is still up there up on the mountain where Carol Lombard was killed. She was killed with servicemen and her mother, and they and all that wreckage. It was such a bizarre place to be, they couldn't bring it down, so they brought the bodies down, but it's all up there still. And a friend of mine gave me a button that was somebody's shirt button, and that's what the psychics will pick up, and they go, whoa, there's something here. Of all that whole wreck, I had this little tiny piece. But my friend Michael, he works for TSA and investigates crashes, he's been up there several times. He found Carol Lombard's wedding ring, inscribed by Clark Gable. He found, jewelry, and he has it all, and he cares for it, and it's not on display. And he'll find medals from the servicemen who were killed, and he found the families, and will give them back to the families. He's fine. He found, she called herself Carol Gable. So everyone thinks but everyone says CG Clark Gable, but no, she called herself Carol Gable to, personally. So it's crazy how much stuff they found up there. It's
That's such
still
a
there.
tragic story too.
Yeah, yeah.
That whole thing. I wanted to talk to you about the term death hag and what it means exactly.
It's something I made up on a whim. Back when I was living in England, I liked the sightseeing. I loved doing that in Hollywood. And when I was over there, I was working on my residency. So there was 18 months where I couldn't leave and I couldn't work until I got my green card, or whatever they call it there, leave to stay, I think they call it there. But anyway, I couldn't leave or I couldn't work. Right at that moment, the internet was taking off. And there was one main site called Find a Grave. And I reached out, I got my first computer. I remember it so vividly. And I reached out to him and I said, I'm thinking about, his name was Jim Tipton, who started it. I said, do you mind? I'm going to start a website. I'm going to call it Find a Death. And he's like, oh, no, sure, go. It's all good with me. So I started it, and I started chronicling deaths of famous people with photographs. It was sort of like virtual sightseeing. There was no Google Earth. I mean, it wasn't Google wasn't even a thing yet. It wasn't even invented yet. So it was virtual sightseeing, and there was an introduction page, and I was just introducing myself. And John Waters, there's certain terms for hags. There's one that people use for gay people, that women that hang around gay people, they call, a certain, they would call it, you know what I'm saying. I think most people know
Yes.
what I'm saying. And then somebody said there's celebrity hags, people that hang on to celebrities and want to know everything about them. But I said death hags. I just said, hello, death hags. And it's funny because that people embraced it, and it sort of surprised me that people embraced it, because they call, there's groups on the internet called, the death hags, and the one on Facebook has got, I don't know, like 30,000 members or something like that. It's really kind of cool. So people, when they found my website back in the 90s, they were like, I thought I was the only one. I didn't know. There was a time where people would buy their true crime magazines at the supermarket and hide them, and, in their bags, so no one would see they're doing it. And now, as we have 24-hour stations devoted just to autopsies, and so that the times have changed. But back then, when I was putting this stuff out, nobody realized there were other people like them. They didn't have to be ashamed of it.
Yeah, I mean, the term is in the Urban Dictionary now. I wrote it down. It says a person obsessed with the history, culture, and traditions of death, usually also enjoys obituary reading, cemetery walks, murder stories, true and unusual manner of death tales, etc. And I'm
Well,
like,
there you are.
that
A word I
describes
made
it.
up. And I copyrighted that shit. Now it's all, I trademarked it. It's all, nobody can touch that, because it became embraced. And I thought, I don't want somebody else using it and saying that's theirs.
Oh,
So,
you did?
yeah.
Good for you. I did
Yeah.
not know.
Yeah. I've never done anything with it, but I have. I'm like, it's like, no, that came out of my brain. So I just want to be a little bit a little bit, you know, possessive of it,
Yeah.
protective of it. Yeah.
Yeah, why not? So, a few years later, after Girls Next Door and everything, we did a couple of Halloween tours together. And one night we did the Comedy Store.
Oh God, did you guys? I don't remember because I couldn't go in. I had to stay with the vehicle outside. So,
Oh,
so I didn't realize you got into that again. I don't remember. Did you get something good in there?
he gave us the best tour I've ever had. So unbelievable. We got to go in every nook and cranny of that place, and the stories were unreal. Like the green rooms, and this is where Sam Kinison was like doing coke on this table,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like, just like the stories were incredible.
Was it Polly that gave you that? Polly Shore gave you that
No,
tour?
he set us up with this other guy who was just like amazing and
Oh,
the
good.
biggest wealth of knowledge I've ever experienced there.
Good, 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 good. Because I thought Polly was a little bit distracted by you guys. He was a little bit more focused on you guys than on any kind of else. But so I'm glad. I'm so glad. I am jealous of that. That would have been really something to see. I'd have
But
loved
Polly
that.
arranged everything for us.
Okay, cool. That's neat. And then where else did you go?
On another tour, we did the Omen House.
Yeah, I was in there for that one. Yeah. David is a treat. I like David. I'm very fond of David. He's always been so kind and so generous. And for those that don't know, David built a house on Cielo Drive in Benedict Canyon where the everyone knows them as the Manson murders happened in 1969. So his front door is probably 100 yards, probably 50 yards from where the murders occurred. And when David built his house, well, he started seeing things, people feeling things, and now his house has just taken up. Now it's one of the most famous haunted houses in America.
Yeah. And he reached out to me. He really wants to do the show, but I really want to go there and like do the podcast in person and kind of do like a walking tour and investigation while I'm there. So I need to like get a crew together,
Yeah,
like a film crew, I guess, or at least just like camera, something.
yeah. Oh, I'd love to go if you invite me.
Yeah, I'd love to have you come. I'll let
That
you
would
know
be so
because
fun.
you're the reason I even know David. You're the first person that invited me to David's house, and this was way back, right after we first met. So it would be like 2005 or six.
Gosh, yeah. He's been so accommodating to people, wanting to film in his house. And also we got to go on the Jean Harlow property too, up on Easton Drive.
Yes, let's talk about that too, because that's also in Benedict Canyon. And the last time I had you on the podcast, we really were talking about Benedict Canyon because so many crazy things have happened in that canyon that it
Yeah,
almost seems cursed. In fact, I think we called the episode Curse of Benedict Canyon
yeah.
because there's just so many tragic, crazy stories that have happened there. But yeah, the let's talk about JC Bring's house.
Well, J.C. Sebring's house is on Easton Drive, probably a mile from where the Tate murders occurred. And Sharon Tate and J.C. Sebring were a couple, and in the early '60s, early to mid '60s, and then Roman Polanski pursued her pretty aggressively, and she ended up dumping Jay and going with Roman, and they got married, and they moved into this house up on the hill, and but still remained friends with Jay, and so close friends. And then Roman was in Europe making a movie and asked Jay to check up on her. He was completely fine with her being friends with him, wasn't threatened by the relationship at all. Though I do think Jay Sebring held a candle for her. You know, I think he never fell out of love with her, I think. So he would go down there quite often. Now his house, as I say, is about a mile from where the Tate house was built originally by Paul Byrne, who was an MGM executive for his new bride, Jean Harlow. And shortly after they got married, he, they say, committed suicide in the house.
Mm.
Some people don't think it was suicide. A lot of people think it was murder. But I guess she never went back into the house again. But that was in the 30s, and I'm not sure quite who bought what when. I'm not sure of. But when Jay was murdered Jay bought the house, and he thought it was kind of groovy. They say that happened in his house because it had such a wild history to it. And the people I know who own that house now bought it from Jay's family. So they're the ones that have been in it since 1969 or 1970, whenever his estate was settled. And they've kept it looking very much like it did. I've never been in the house. I know them pretty well, and they would, I think they'd be honest with me if they saw or felt anything. But they were generous about me bringing you up, and occasionally, yeah, occasionally other people. So yeah, yeah. That's a great house. It's a great house, like a Tudor castle. It's got a turret and everything up in the hills, right up in the canyon. It's almost in the middle of LA or on the outskirts of LA. So it's a really spooky looking house. And
Yeah.
to know that history, there's one murder victim and one, someone who was actually dead in the house. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, and I think doesn't isn't there a documented story from Sharon Tate that she said she saw a ghost or
Yes. Yeah,
in
I
that
always
house?
thought that that was nonsense, like somebody made it up afterwards, but no, I found the article, and it was like 1965 that it was published, that she was in bed, Jay was out of town, and she saw a little man running, across the room. She was in the bedroom, and he was walking back and forth, like, frantically. He didn't look at her, but it was just this little, man that was walking back and forth. And she left the room and was going down the stairs, and I don't know the exact. There was someone tied to the banister when a woman who she interpreted, or maybe it was afterwards, she interpreted to be a representative of herself being tied to the banister, and they say with her throat cut. And then she walked to an area and was pouring herself a drink at a girl, and but something made her start peeling off wallpaper in this particular area where the bar was, and they found a secret bar that even Jay didn't know about in this house. So yeah, there's a little. I mean, it's not a huge place. The people that live there confirmed, yeah, it's definitely there. But it was probably like a little wine cellar or something like that. But nobody knew it was even there, because I knew Jay's old mother-in-law. She was a waitress at the Formosa back then, and she had worked at all the supper clubs. And I always heard that someone who, she worked at Trocadero and the Crescendo and Ciro. She was a waitress at all those places. And somebody told me that somebody related to Jay Sebring worked there. So I went there. I'm just so bold, I mean, that was polite, but I went to the bartender. I said, "There's just somebody that works there that knew Jay Sebring." And this lovely lady who, I would say mid-60s, turns around. She goes, "Well, he was married to my daughter." And we just hit it off, and she was so nice. And she'd bring in pictures of Jay to show me, and yeah, it was really a treat to know her. And but yeah, she confirmed a lot of that business.
That's crazy. Before we move on, I want to still talk about the Omen House. So yes, David wants me to come there, but on our tour that night, the ghost tour that we did, I had an experience. So we went down into the room where I guess it's like the theater room or
Yeah,
whatever, the
yeah.
bottom floor, and David walks in the room and we're all standing around kind of in a semicircle. There's like a table in the middle, and he has his back to the door and he's telling us this whole ghost story, and I watched the door close on its own behind him.
Mm, yeah.
And some people that were on the tour felt like he did it, like that he swatted the door closed behind him. But I went back after this and I did some investigating myself to see if you could just kind of like tap it like that and it would close. There was carpeting and stuff, and you couldn't just like close it like that. Like you couldn't just like sneakily tap it closed behind you and it would like just continue to close.
Yeah,
This,
yeah.
I watched it like just start to close and go all the way closed.
Yeah, I mean, people will always say, there will always be people who don't believe in that and they want to disprove something. I've known David for probably 20 years now, and I know that he's not a liar. He's a colorful person. But I've seen enough stuff there to know that it's not, I was standing one time with him in front of the bar. There's a dining room and there's a bar, and the kitchen's on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And David and I were talking, and I glanced over at the kitchen. There was a stack of red cups, solo cups, and they just they went flying. Well, and he goes, "Now do you see what I'm talking about?" So there's always things, little odd things. The lights flicker when I talk sometimes down there. Sometimes nothing happens. And
Yeah.
but yeah, certainly a lot of stuff happens in the house. 100% haunted. 100%.
Yeah, I think so too. So another thing that happened in LA that we talked about on our last podcast, but the reason I want to bring it up again is because I have like a little bit of new information and actually a relation to it that I did not know I had. But do you remember the beheading that happened? The guy was on the phone with Southwest
Yeah,
Airlines.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So I found out that the guy who was on the phone with Southwest Airlines was Nick, my husband's godmother's husband, ex-husband.
Really? Oh my gosh, that's wild. So, oh man, yeah, I forget. I'm trying to think of what his name was. Robert Lees and
Morley Ingelson.
Engelson. That's right, Dr. Engelson. Wow, that's wild. Did you learn anything new about that from them? It was just an odd association.
I
That's
mean, the
did you
notes
go?
that I
Did you
took,
go? Oh my God, when you found out?
yes, I was like, "Wait a minute." And I was, like, trying to put everything together. I'm like, "Wait a minute, you mean the guy that was on the phone with Southwest Airlines and the homeless person broke in and, like, chopped the person's head off?" But I thought that Morley got his head chopped off, but it wasn't.
No, no, it was Lee's that got it. Morley got
Stabbed.
Morley got his penis cut off and his a fireplace poker in his throat. And yeah, and there was also a big rip in his stomach too. So he was damaged pretty bad. Yeah. And not as bad as Robert Lee's. I mean, my God, that was I mean, he chopped his head off in a different house. And then Robert Lees was this little 90-something-year-old screenwriter. And one day he was asleep, 5 in the morning, and this guy randomly walked into his house and saws his head off. And he took his belt off and he looped it under it through his neck and out his mouth and tied it, put his head over his shoulder, hopped the back fence to Engelson's house, left it on the bed, white bedspread, so the head's laying there on the bed and it's just crimson, and then goes in the other room and Engelson was on the phone and got him. Fascinating. It's
It is
horrific.
so crazy. And the Southwest Airlines operator is the one that called 911.
Yeah, yeah. And because they went to Engelson's house and they didn't know who the head belonged to. They just there's a head in the bedroom. Nobody knew where it came from. And then Robert Lee's had a girlfriend, and they were supposed to go to an event later that day, and she went to his house and found his torso just without a head on it. And then
Oh
so
my god.
but it was weird because the house used to be on my tour, and I got this weird call one day, and it was a woman. She left on the answering machine. My name is Helen. Oh boy, sorry, rest in peace. I can't remember your last name, but her name was Helen, and she says I live on Courtney Avenue, and I I was Robert Lee's girlfriend, and I'm the one who discovered his body, and I would like to know what you're saying. I know I have a lot of details about the case, and if you want to know more, call me. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the call. This is the call you want to have, and it turns out she was a reporter and she covered like the Manson case and everything. And she was a sex therapist. And she told me, all about what a nice guy he was and how she stumbled upon it. And she was really, really super, super nice. In fact, I put her interview on my YouTube channel, but she was so, so kind. And yeah, but it was just an odd call to get, because it's so random, but she
Yeah,
was so
because
nice.
I'm sure you're used to getting the opposite calls. Like, this is a family member, and what are you saying about them? And I want you to stop. You know,
Yeah. In fact, of all the people's houses that have ever been on my tour as a location that's on my tour, that's the only house, the people that bought it, that people come to my shop and got in my face and were yelling at me to get out of that, don't come by their house anymore.
which
So that
house
was
was that?
that's the Robert Lee's house. And it was the
Oh,
only house, and I've had people come out and, flip me off and stuff like that. But this is the first one where somebody pursued my address and came to my place of business and started in on me. So
yeah.
that was interesting.
Well, the only other information I have on it is that the guy who did it, stole Morley's Mercedes and then went to the gates of Paramount
Mhm.
Studios and was arrested there out front of the studios.
That's right. In fact, yeah, I remember now. He went to Paramount trying to get in, and he couldn't get in. And he went across the street to Lucy's Al Adobe, that restaurant, and he sat on the wall out in front of it. And I guess one of the guards at the guard shack saw something on the news because they had a person of interest and saw the picture. I think that's what it was, wasn't it? Do you know this?
Yeah, I think that's the same story I'm hearing too. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they didn't. He had a Bible and a can of mace. I remember that now. When they arrested him, but without incident, they arrested him. But I wrote
That's
him
so
in prison
crazy.
once too. I wrote him a letter, not a fan letter, but I wanted to know if he'd answer some questions because I wanted to know the details. And he
Yeah.
was nice enough to write me back. I wasn't looking for an autograph or anything like that. In fact, he didn't sign it, he didn't put his name on it, but he did say, "Are you a reporter or something?" What it was. He said, I used a Janis Joplin stamp on the letter. That's what it was. And he said, I was listening to a Joplin song earlier today and your letter came in. And I thought, well, this is an odd coincidence. So that's why he responded with a letter. But he didn't respond back when I just said I wanted historic details. He wanted to know if I was writing a book about it or something like that.
Oh. What was his excuse? Was he on drugs? Was
Yeah.
he
I think it
Yeah.
was meth. Yeah. I know that he was ex military. And I know that he worked as a stripper in gay bars, though he wasn't gay. And so for some reason he was in that neighborhood, which isn't near any nightclubs. I mean, that's right off, but right near the Halloween Street. There's no nightclubs around there. They're all further down. So I don't know what he was doing there. Just randomly went into that house. Very weird.
The whole thing is so weird.
Yeah, yeah, fascinating.
It's very weird. I know I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, but like we talked about the Sharon Tate house and everything, and how was it working with Quentin Tarantino?
That was so cool. I had about God, it's been so long now. I had a documentary that we did, myself and Mike Dorsey and Lloyd Adams, called "The 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter," and it was a geographic retelling of the murders. It wasn't like this is why it happened. Everything was this is where it happened. So we went to the street where the murders occurred, and then we went to the house, Jay's house on Easton Drive, and we interviewed my friends, and they let us walk around. And then we went up to where they hosed off in the driveway after the murders. And then we went to the corner where they ditched the clothes and threw them off the cliff. It was just a geographic retelling of it. So it wasn't any theories or anything like that. So, and that they said Quentin Tarantino wanted to talk to you. There's all this talk I know at the time about him doing a movie about the Manson murders. I'm like, I don't think so. That sounded a bit silly, but he had me in yeah, that's right. I was expecting there to be a dozen people in this room, and I was going to talk to a dozen people. But I met the production designer and the second director, and they said, "Well, you want to meet QT?" I'm like, "Okay." So we walked into his office, and my documentary was there, and they shut the door, and it was him and I talked for a couple of hours about the background of the case, and it was really exciting because he is a nerd. I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting a, dude kind of a thing, and he was really very matter of fact about it. And he respected what I do. And he genuinely wanted to pick my brain about the facts that I knew. And then we set up another meeting where we went around to all the different locations, to the Sebring Salon, which was on the tour, and we walked up Cielo Drive. And I didn't call David at that point, but we walked up to the gates, and of course there was a neighbor about 2 doors down that was screaming at us. And then I talked to my friends who own that house, the Sebring house, and I said, "Do you mind if I bring a friend up?" I wasn't trying to be mysterious, but I just, "Do you mind?" And they said, "No, no, no, sure." So I pulled up and it was Tarantino, and they were like, "Oh, okay." So it was kind of a funny thing. And it turns out that Tarantino wanted that house, to the Sebring house. That was his main goal. And we were also location shooting for Rick Dalton's house, or he was looking location searching for the Dalton house, because I know he was trying to figure out if he could actually use Cielo Drive for the movie, and he could tell that this wasn't going to work out. They needed a bigger driveway or something
Yeah.
like that. So then they found their own thing, but they wanted to shoot at the Sebring house, and my friends let him. So he shot up there for several days. They redid the swimming pool. They put in Jay's old hot tub, and I don't know if they did interior shots as well, but they shot up there for a couple of days. Unfortunately, that didn't make it into the main film, but I'm sure it'll be released sometime. Yeah. I was talking to one of the production people that said everyone knows Tarantino made 4.5 hour movie, so fingers crossed that stuff will come out. The Sebring Salon, they didn't use that either. I don't think. No, they never did use J. Sebring Salon, and they put it back. It still said just the way it did in 1969. They put up the paneling, and they had the word Sebring on the outside of it, and that was one of the funny bits, because I wasn't there in any capacity except to to look at it, to take pictures of documenting it. I didn't have any reason to be there. And then somebody saw me, and they said, "Do you want to come and say hello to QT?" And I was like, "Sure." So I went in, and Margot Robbie was there. At that point, I didn't know who she was, just that she was the woman to play Sharon Tate. And I spoke a little bit about it. And as I was leaving, I asked for permission to take pictures because he notoriously doesn't want any pictures taken of any of his sets or anything. And he said, "Yeah, go ahead, no problem." So I was leaving, and he says, "Hey, wait a second. I want to ask you something. What was the name of the book that Abigail Folger, who was one of the victims, was reading in bed when when Susan Atkins grabbed her and pulled her into the main room and started, with the carnage?" And it was Madame Bovary. So he's, "I knew you'd know. I knew you'd know." So it ended up in the movie. I told him about the sheet music that was on the piano. I read that in another book. So, all research is based on research. I wasn't there. So you read other books and you collect the information. So I know that, and also know that Paul Revere and the Raiders, Mark Lindsay used to live there with Terry Melcher before Sharon and Roman moved in. And he told me, "Well, we wrote these two songs on the piano that was in the room where the murders happened." And that piano stayed there because the house was rented, fully furnished. So the same piano that was in the room when the murders occurred were where these two Paul Revere and the Raiders songs were composed. So they ended up in the movie too. So a lot of the little nuggets that I shared with him ended up. It was really satisfying to see it in the movie. It was like a great note to leave LA on, actually, because it was like, now I've done it. I've done it. But watching it, Bridget, it was like going to the El Coyote where they supposedly had their last supper in real life, and going to that shoot and seeing that Abigail Folger's yellow car pull up into the driveway, and those four actors representing those four victims wearing the clothes that they were wearing that night with smiles on their faces walking into the El Coyote. All the street lights, all the cars, all the parking meters, all the billboards, exactly like 1969. And that was when we were at the Sebring Salon. Forgive me, I go on about this. I'm trying to keep it short. But when we were after I left the Sebring Salon, I heard my name being called, and I turned around, and it was Tarantino. I'm like, "This is surreal." He goes, "Come here, I want you to meet somebody." And I went back, and he goes, "Scott, meet Jay." And it was Emil Hirsch dressed like Jay, wearing the clothes that he was murdered in, came out, and it just with a big smile on his face and holds his hand out. And I was like overcome, you know what I mean? I'm practically, tears in my eyes. And I said, "Just please do these people proud. All they are black and white pictures in a true crime book right now. Please just do them well." Or I said, "God bless you guys for giving them, smiles and voices, and as they're no longer murder victims. They were
Yeah.
breathing people." I loved that, loved it. And that was my thing, so I was time traveling, they were making it exactly the way it was. It was, there's nothing like it. It was amazing.
That's so cool. You went and saw Mary's grave.
I did. What's the funniest thing was that somebody reached out to me and said, "I live right across the street from James Dean Cemetery, and I can see Mary O'Connor from my house." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because I knew Mary. I didn't know her, but I knew her, who she was. And I was like, "That's insane." So we were in Fairmount because I go because it's James Dean's hometown, and I'm a big James Dean fan, huge James Dean fan. So I always go to the cemetery. And I remember one time I called you, and I don't think even you knew at that point that she was in that cemetery. That was the first time I called you. And then the second time was when I was there, and I sent you the pictures of being at the grave. But apparently, according to her niece who reached out to me, that she was just a Dean fan, much like Hefner was a Maryland fan. And that's where she wanted to be. Her husband was there, obviously, before her, but that she chose, as I understand it, that she chose that place because she was a Dean fan, which really surprised me. Did that surprise you?
I did not know she was such a James Dean fan, but I do know that she used to do race car driving and stuff back in her younger
Oh,
days.
Indiana. Yeah. The Indy
Hmm.
500. Sure. Huh.
And I thought, now I need to double check with Holly and stuff, but I thought she was from Indiana originally.
I had, no, I don't know. I had pulled up a kind of a background stuff on her, but I don't recall. I didn't think there was because, she had left it so long ago. I don't think she had a Fairmount connection. I'm not sure, but I understood, according to this, I think she was a great niece of Mary's, and she would ask her mother, who was like the niece, Mary's niece, and she said that the reason she was there is because she was a Dean fan. I Yeah, that's I'm pulling up that conversation now of what she told me. She sent me pictures of her growing up with the captain and her
Does she have
mother.
red curly hair?
Well, there was a couple of people that she mentioned that I was going to ask you about. No, she has straight hair, and
Oh.
her cousins called themselves. Their names were. I thought I was going to ask you actually if you knew these people from there, because apparently Mary sort of picked them, sort of took them under her wing or something. And Rocky was one of the people. Does that name sound familiar to you at all?
Mm-mm.
And yeah, Uncle Rocky and his brother Lucky. And his dad lived in a boat in Marina del Rey, and Mary was a sort of a neighbor. That's how they met. And when my uncle was no longer, well, that just went into a little bit more of the family stuff. But Mary Grace was her one of her first cousins, named after Mary. And and her little brother called, or her uncle called Mary Grandma Mary. So it was just an interesting, but she told me, that's what she told me. She asked her aunt, I guess, who knew Mary, said that she was a fan. But I just found that, that's an extreme, thing to buy a grave, and kind of Fairmount's not on the beaten track. It's like
Yeah.
2 hours from any major city. But yeah, that surprised me to learn that. In fact, it surprised the people in Fairmount. I was talking to my friends who own the James Dean Museum and others that own the James Dean Gallery, and I said, "Do you know anything about this?" Like, no, we never heard that. So it was kind
Yeah.
of interesting.
Have you been to Hef's grave?
I have, yeah, several times. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting about Hefner, Bridget, is that he paved a lot of ways for people, sexuality to be not so taboo. And after he died, people have sort of turned on him in a way. And I guess exploitation there's a different meaning than it did 50 or 60 years ago when he started Playboy. But it's fascinating to me. So I know the people that are really big in the Maryland community, and they always make sure that his grave is covered up whenever anything Maryland goes on there. It's sort of interesting, that sort of how people have turned. Maybe it's Me Too. Maybe that's why it was. And I know, listening to your podcast with Holly, that there's a whole, it was a lot of it was, kind of smarmy. Some of the people that were around and et cetera. But it's just interesting how publicly there's been a total turnaround for so many people on him.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I did not go for the longest time, but I finally just went. I don't know. I think it was maybe a year ago now. And I only went because I was having a meeting in the office building that's like right there, like
Yeah.
looks down on it. And the guy was like, "Oh, I walk over here on my lunch all the time. It's really peaceful. It's nice. Let's walk over there." So we walked over there together, and I'm like feeling really nervous and anxious because I've never seen it before. And
Hmm.
I see it, and I swear something pulled my hair.
Ooh, wow. That's nice. That's nice, because that was an acknowledgement, and you didn't get that. You didn't get that closure with him. I know.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool that you got that. I bet you that was a nod, just saying hi, and just knowing that you're there. Oh, I love that, Bridget. That's really sweet.
Yeah.
Um, wow.
It was an interesting experience because I just felt like a lot of anxiety to go near it. I was
Mhm.
just like kind of freaking out a little bit, and I was glad somebody was with me. It's not even somebody I know very well, but at least somebody was with me. Yeah, and then the hair pull, and it's interesting because I wear extensions and stuff like that, but like it just sort of felt like my hair got stuck on something, like on my sweater or
Mhm.
something like that.
Mhm.
And so, but I turned around and there was like nothing. It wasn't stuck on anything. It was definitely like a hair pull.
Did you feel any comfort or any kind of like a sort of smile, or were you just kind of caught up in the, that was weird?
Caught up in the, oh, that was weird.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see that definitely.
And still kind of just getting over like the anxiety of seeing it and walk and for the first time and walking near it and stuff. And then the hair pull. And then my first thing is to just be like, oh, what's my hair caught on? Like what's pulling on it?
Hmm.
And then when you realize there's nothing that it's caught on or nothing there, then it was sort of like, oh, what was that? Because something definitely pulled my hair. So
And behind Hefner, just about 20 feet, is Betty Page. So if you're facing that, maybe it's Betty Page pulling you back.
I mean, there's so many people there
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you would recognize and know if you ever visit that cemetery. There's a lot of famous people there, and not only that, but there was like Dick Rosenzweig is buried there, which I didn't realize, and he was Hef's right hand guy for like 40 years or something like that.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, there's so many names there. Yeah, Dorothy Stratton is right over there too. Fascinating, but that's a wonderful place. But I love that. I feel like that was it as some sort of acknowledgement. I think I like to think that anyway.
Yeah, I think that's all my questions for you. I was going to ask you a little bit just about like all the traveling around that you've been doing. And one of the things you inspired me to do is you went to the spider pool.
Hmm. Did you go? Did you get
I
to go?
went.
Oh,
I went.
good.
Holly and
Okay,
I
good.
went and we got pictures.
Good.
So
Oh,
for
that's
those
such
of
a
you
great.
guys that don't know, for those that don't know, will you tell them what the spider pool is?
Well, I'm not brushed up on that. I can't think of the guy's name, but he was sort of George something. But it was built in the 20s, and he was like a precursor to Hefner. I mean, he had sort of the mansion in the hills that was sort of a wacky place he put together with set pieces of Valentino from he had like some pieces from a Valentino movie, and all his rooms were decorated like movie sets or something. And it was just a very freewheeling, some more conservative people say it was debauchery, and there were lots of beautiful women. And I know that he gave out swimsuits that disintegrated to the women who were swimming in his swimming pool. And
What?
behind the swimming pool there was a lovely pool, but on the end of it where the diving board was, it behind it was this incredible mosaic of a spider and a web, and there's a fly caught in the web. But this thing is like 20 feet tall, and the house burned, and the ruins of the house are long gone. The only thing that's up there anymore is that wall and pieces of the pool that are distinctive. I heard it's gone now.
Oh,
It's sort of,
really?
yeah, that's what I've heard, that it's gone now because it was becoming, I guess, a nuisance for the people that live up there, because it was a mansion, but then the property was divided up. So now it's this little piece in the middle of like five pieces of property. So to get to it, luckily when I went, I knew the people that owned one of the properties, so they let us go in. But
Oh.
people leave you alone. But you didn't have to like. We scaled the hill because it was, we had a whole crew with us and everything. But there was another way you could just walk in,
We
wasn't it?
s- we scaled the hill and got poison oak or ivy or whatever it is in the process. But I have
Oh,
cute pictures in like cute lingerie and heels because we brought a backpack with like stuff in it and we
yeah.
changed really quick and took like pinup photos next to it because
Oh,
it
good for you.
that's what it was known for. Like a lot of pinups would go there and take photos like back in the day with this spider wall. So it was like a known thing.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of what they call cheesecake back then. Which basically, it's funny because women with like bulky brasiers on, but there were a lot of sexy shots too. But yeah, yeah, it was a real quest for people to go there and take those pictures. And then for about 20, 25, 30 years, it sort of just rotted away in there. And a bunch of people on the internet sort of figured out where it was, and Google Earth, and that was before it was good Google Earth, so they're kind of seeing a little speck. And yeah, that was fascinating. It was like one of those places, one of those few places that you could still find that no one found yet. That was a neat place to go to. I love that
Yeah,
place.
for sure. Tell me about the Cecil.
Well, okay, so it was Ghost Adventures. Zach called me up. I've done a few of them. We did the Hollywood Sign one, and I did the silent movie theater one, which was pretty good too. And that was the one where I saw the orbs in front of me, like bzz, right, like a fly. That was a pretty weird experience. But then it was during COVID, unfortunately, and the Hotel Cecil there was only one floor that was occupied by the residents. It was like a transient hotel. I think it was more low income, but the second floor was occupied by those people, but the rest of the hotel was wide open. And I don't know how many floors it is, 6, 10 floors. I don't even remember now, but every floor was unlocked. And after doing the research, going through that incredible lobby, I had the numbers of the rooms, and we were going from room to room. This is where this particular person jumped out of the window. This is the one where this terrible person, this person was stabbed to death in this room, and this person jumped from the window and landed on someone down in the on the sidewalk, and they both died. There are just so many. The Cecil Hotel's in the middle of what they call now Skid Row, and it's a really not a good area to go to. I remember going in there, and like the rats were like this, they were like dogs. They were huge, so it was not nice, and it was all dark. We were going through most of it with flashlights, but every room was open. So we went to the Richard Ramirez room, and of course Elisa Lamb, who was the young woman who was it was a hostel for a long time, and she was traveling through LA and very famously disappeared. And they found that crazy elevator footage of her in the elevator acting very animated, and no one was there, like she was talking to somebody. And then she went missing, and they found her several days later in the water tower above the hotel. So that's what brought it to everyone's attention. But it had been around for a long time. I mean, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, supposedly lived there while he killed some of the people. And then there was that Austrian guy named Jack Unterweger, who was a killer, who they released from prison in Austria, and he was on like talk shows because he was like this rehabilitated killer, and he was like very, he wrote books, and people are having him on this talk show, like there's the success of the justice system rehabilitation. And then he was working on researching the Night Stalker, and he went to stay at the Cecil Hotel and killed people while I was there. It was just mental. So there was one particular room. I mean, that place kind of freaked me out anyway. And then Zach made sure I could get on the roof, so I was up there without any crews, and I got to walk around the roof, and I got to walk up to the ladder that she walked up to get into the water tower back then. And that was sort of chilling. But there was only one location of all of them that actually I reacted to, and that was there was a woman by the name, they nicknamed her Pigeon Goldie, and she lived there. She was a retired telephone operator, and she wore baseball caps, and everybody loved her. And she used to go and feed the pigeons in Pershing Square. Walk over to that, which isn't very far, and it's still an unsolved crime. But they found her in this little room, and she had been abused sexually, very severely, and ultimately, slashed and murdered, stabbed several times. And out of all those rooms, Ramirez and these people they claim are just straight up possessed, Richard Ramirez, And so I was in there all by myself. After everyone left, I went back to that room, and I didn't feel anything. But Pigeon Goldie's room, I was in there, and it was like all of a sudden there's every hair. Maybe it was because I knew how violent it was, but it was not that big of a room. It's like 10 by 15 room. But it was like it was just every hair was up, and it was like it was like a panic. That only happened to me one other time. It was at the Wonderland house, where I was up there, and it was like, I got to get out of here right now. We're not even,
Wow.
I just can't do it. And I called Troy on the way home, my husband, and I said, get the salt, get the holy water. And I wouldn't even go into the house after being in that place without being blessed first, because it was so disturbing. I do think the Cecil's got something. There's too much going on there for it not to be something going on, on a large scale. That was creepy as heck. Yeah, that was something.
Didn't you really get creeped out at the Omen house one time too and have to walk out?
Yeah, that bottom floor, I've gotten better at it. Going down to the third floor, where you call the entertainment room, and then he has that other room in the back, that the dirt room,
Yeah.
which is built right into the mountain.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, there are, again, just the feeling. It's just the feeling that it's like, I don't like it here. I want to get out of here. And for years I wouldn't even go down to that level again. Now I'll do it. But it's interesting. He has a dog, Reggie, and he'll go down to the second floor, and but Reggie will follow him. But he goes down to the third floor. Reggie just turns and goes up the stairs, his dog. And it happened. I've been there, so many times, and Reggie does it every single time. He's not cowering, but he's like, no, he just turns back.
He's
He
like,
will
"Nope,
not go
you
down that
have
third.
fun down there. I'm not going."
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of times I felt that way too, because there are people that have been. There was one woman that was in there that he has cameras, 1,000 cameras all over his house, and there was a woman that was in one of the floors downstairs, and it was in one of the bedrooms, and it's all infrared, because there were no lights on at the time, and she just walked up into a wall and just started screaming. I mean, like blood curdling screams, and it was like, man, I've never felt. I don't know what I felt. I felt like I had to get out, but I've never felt particularly threatened. But I knew I didn't like what was down there, and I didn't want to be around it. But this woman straight up started screaming and facing a wall. It was bizarre, bizarre.
That is weird. Well, remember we tried to leave with our tour and the bus wouldn't start?
Oh God, oh God, yes. Yes.
It had
When
been working fine the whole night.
Mhm. And, I'm sorry, I keep prattling on, I'm sorry, but when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out, and Tarantino, I was like it was like a big deal for me, and a lot of people were focusing on me because it's just because I was involved. I was so excited. I shared it with people. So a lot of people knew I was involved in it. We were having a celebration. You and Holly came to it at Raleigh Studios for the anniversary. And it wasn't a yay murder. There were no pictures. We weren't even talking about murder. It was just a 60s things. People were dressed like go-go dancers. And we were trying to make it into a positive thing. We're acknowledging what happened. We're also celebrating the people, not what happened. And so I had a lot of focus. Deborah Tate, Sharon's sister, originally said she was okay with it, but for some reason she came after me. Thought you're exploiting my sister. It's like, well, nothing's changed. We're not exploiting her, but I guess to a degree we are. But I've always been really conscious of that, and I've always been respectful, and I donate on a regular basis to Justice for Homicide Victims, which her mother Doris Tate set up. So we tried to make that balance, but for some reason Deborah came at me. And then I had a psychic saying, don't go up to Cielo Drive that day. Don't go up to Cielo Drive that day. There's too much going on. Just avoid it altogether. So it was on the anniversary, and I took some people up there and went up to Cielo Drive, and everything. All these people are coming after me. I was nervous. My car caught on fire. We're just driving up Cielo Drive, and literally flames coming out of my car on the 50th anniversary on Cielo Drive with a load of tourists in the car. So it was like one of the craziest things. I mean, there's no coincidences like that here. That night, yes, I remember that now, the car not starting up. But that car caught on fire on Cielo Drive on the 50th anniversary of the murders. That was crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
Sorry, I'll stop talking now.
No, I know, like, there's just so much. I feel like we could just go on for days. I just have to have you back on, that's all.
Oh, I'd love it. That's just always so much fun. Always so much fun.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories with us. Tell everyone listening how they can follow your channel and all the things that you're up to.
Oh gosh, yeah, I didn't even mention that. Yeah, so since my company went under we closed it down. It didn't go under, but we decided to close it. I do now exclusive YouTube videos for of the sort of thing I used to do. I still have my collection of odd celebrity artifacts, and a lot of times I'll take them back to where they came from. And I have somebody gave me the sink that Lucille Ball used to dye her hair from her house. So I went back to her house with the sink. I mean, it was ridiculous. These people know what the hell I'm doing, but it was sort of like taking these things back to where they came from. A lot of times I'll take like napkins or cups from old hotels, and I'll go back to the hotel or places where they've been torn down, and I'll go back to the location, sort of a then and now kind of a thing. So I've done over the years, I've gone to, like, for instance, Cary Grant. Cary Grant, the famous Cary Grant, was traveling at the end of his life with a show called A Conversation with Cary Grant. He was in Davenport, Iowa, and when he died, in between his sound check and the show, he died. Well, a friend of mine had a ticket to that show. He gave it to me 20 years ago or something like that. So I went back over the last summer. I went back to Davenport, Iowa with the ticket. I went to the box office and talked to one of the people that worked there, and they actually took me to the seat that was this seat for that conversation. So you know what I mean? It was sort of a magical kind of, putting it all together again. And it was, here's the ticket that never got used because it's the show that Cary Grant didn't live long enough to do, but he was there in the theater ready to do it. So I like doing odd sort of things like that. I enjoy taking people to where people died, and I try to, be respectful as much as I can. Some people, I always say, you either get it or you really, really don't get it. But Dearly Departed Tours is me. It always has been. You can look up Scott Michaels on YouTube as well. But Dearly Departed Tours as well. And I'm putting up stuff all the time. So I'm excited. It's a great, I can go anywhere and do everything on my phone now. So it's great.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Ghost Bunny podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on my spooky adventures, and I look forward to sharing a new ghost story with you each week. Please subscribe to our podcast so you're always the first to know when a new episode is out, and follow us on social media at Ghost Bunny Podcast on Instagram for photos and sneak peeks, and at Ghost Bunny Podcast on YouTube for the video version of the podcast. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you for having me. It's so nice to see you.
It was so nice to see you too.